Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into a single text that's, well, profoundly shaped human history. It's influenced whole civilizations, resonated with billions for, over 2,000 years?
It really has.
And there isn't just, a book review. It's about trying to grasp its incredible foundational impact on the world we live in.
It's pretty remarkable when you think about it. We're talking about the Holy Bible, not just any religious text, but one that has threads reaching into our laws, our languages, literature, art. It's touched hearts everywhere across so many cultures.
Exactly. So the big question for you listening in that we're trying to unpack is this. How did this collection of ancient writings put together over centuries become arguably the most influential book ever? How did it shape laws, societies, art, and still connect with billions today, regardless of what you personally believe? Think of this as maybe a shortcut to understanding that huge influence.
Yeah, a way in.
So when we say the Bible, it's easy to picture just one big book on a shelf, right?
Right, a single volume.
But it's actually more like a library, a collection.
That's a great way to put it. It's a collection of 66 separate books. And what's really fascinating is who wrote them. Over 40 different authors, we think.
Wow, over 40.
Yeah, across maybe 1,500 years. It's a huge span of time.
Incredible. So let's break that library down a bit. What's in the first major section?
Okay, so the first part, which Christians call the Old Testament, it's also known as the Hebrew Bible. You've got the Torah, which is the law.
Right, the law.
And the prophets, the Psalms, poetry, Proverbs for wisdom, and all these really rich historical books like Genesis, Exodus, Kings.
So those really lay the groundwork.
Absolutely. They set the stage for so much of what comes later. They're foundational.
Okay, so we have those foundational texts in the Old Testament. Then the story moves forward, right, into what Christians call the New Testament. What does that part add? Especially about the figure of Jesus.
Right. The New Testament really shifts the focus. It centers on the life, the teachings, and crucially for Christian belief, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Okay.
So within that, you have the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John telling his story. Then you have letters, they're called epistles, from early church leaders like the Apostle Paul. And it all wraps up with the book of Revelation, which is, prophetic.
A very different kind of book at the end there.
Very different. And think about this whole collection, originally written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Ancient languages. It's now the most translated and distributed book in history. It's out there in over 3,500 languages. Just staggering reach.
That kind of reach is hard to fathom. So with this huge library spanning all that time, all those authors, are there core ideas holding it together, like central themes? You hear it called a compass for humanity.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, there definitely are. At its absolute core, the Bible describes a creator who is loving, just, holy, and who wants a connection, a relationship with people.
It teaches that humans were made in God's image, meant for this perfect relationship, but then something went wrong. Sin entered the picture, creating this separation from that original perfection.
And that separation idea that leads into the central message of the New Testament for believers, doesn't it? How does it address that?
It does. Yes, the New Testament really zeroes in on Jesus Christ, his life, his death, his resurrection, as the solution, basically. In Christian belief, he's seen as the Son of God, the way back to that relationship, the means of reconciliation. But beyond just the theology, there's also this wealth of moral and spiritual guidance. Ethical teachings pushing for things like compassion, truthfulness, forgiveness, humility, justice, love. There's that famous line from Mark's Gospel, love your neighbor as yourself. Kind of sums up a lot of it.
It's amazing how that thread of guidance runs through so much of it. But, looking beyond the core messages, the way it's written is also really striking. It's not all one style. Can you talk about the literary variety?
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely not monolithic. It's more like a tapestry, woven with all sorts of different literary genres.
Okay.
You've got detailed historical accounts, the Kings or Chronicles.
Yeah.
Then you shift gears completely into the poetry of Psalms, which is just full of emotion.
Right. Very different feel.
Totally. Then there's wisdom literature like Proverbs or Ecclesiastes, practical, sometimes philosophical, and of course the powerful, often symbolic, prophetic books like Isaiah or Daniel.
And then the New Testament adds even more genres, right? The Gospels have their unique storytelling feel.
Exactly, narrative accounts of Jesus' life.
Then the letters are more like arguments or pastoral advice.
Yep, epistles addressing specific communities or issues.
And Revelation is this, well, vivid, almost otherworldly, apocalyptic vision.
Right, so you have all these different authors, different times, different styles. How does it hang together? Is there one main story pulling it all through?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is that, despite all that diversity, many see this single unifying thread running through everything.
Which is?
It's this narrative, this unfolding story of what believers understand as God's plan.
Yeah.
A plan to redeem and restore humanity. And it happens through things like faith, obedience, grace. That consistent overarching story is what gives it, I think, such powerful coherence for so many people.
It's just incredible to think how that ancient collection, with all its diversity but that unified core, has had such a massive, almost seismic impact. It didn't just guide individuals, it shaped whole cultures.
Precisely. I mean, you can trace its influence deeply into Western laws, ethics, education, even our everyday language.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond just structures. Think about the arts. Michelangelo looking at Genesis and painting the creation of Adam on the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Or Handel composing his Messiah, drawing directly from biblical texts. These artists found more than just stories. They found this profound commentary on the human condition, creation, struggle, hope, redemption. Themes that speak way beyond just religious circles.
That's a really powerful perspective. It's not just a text, but this deep wellspring of inspiration. And thinking about its impact on society, it's striking how it's often been a spark for big social changes, right? Social justice movements.
It really has. It's quite remarkable. Concepts from the Bible, like justice for the oppressed, or the idea that every single person is made in God's image, the Imago Dei.
Right, inherent worth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That idea gave foundational arguments for huge movements, like the fight against slavery or the civil rights movement in the U.S. It provides this moral framework.
Which raises the question of its relevance now. It's not just presidents or historical figures quoting it.
No, not at all. You hear its verses used by ordinary people all the time, at weddings, at funerals, during personal struggles or crises. It just seems to permeate so many different facets of life, big and small.
Of course, anything with that kind of power, that kind of influence, it's bound to be complex, right? It's probably inevitable that a book this old, this influential, would also be debated, maybe misunderstood, even misused sometimes.
That's definitely true, and it's important to acknowledge engaging with the Bible means engaging with those complexities.
What are some of the common criticisms or tricky areas people point to?
Well, some people point to what they see as contradictions within the text. Others find some passages, particularly in parts of the Old Testament, to be harsh or violent sounding.
Okay.
And then there are always ongoing debates about interpretation. How literally should we read it? Especially when it touches on things like, say, the creation accounts in Genesis, or miracles, or prophecy.
Right, literal versus metaphorical or contextual readings.
Exactly. Those discussions are always happening.
So, when faced with these complex parts, what's the general advice? How do scholars suggest approaching it?
The consensus among many, many scholars is that reading it well requires context. You need to consider the original historical setting, the specific literary genre of the passage you're reading.
Like knowing if you're reading poetry or historical law code?
Precisely.
Oh.
And understanding its overall theological purpose. The idea is to avoid just pulling verses out in isolation. It encourages a more holistic and careful engagement with the text, understanding what it meant then to better grasp what it might mean now.
Okay, that makes sense. So for someone listening who's maybe never really read the Bible or is just curious to dip their toe in, that library can seem huge and maybe a bit intimidating. Where's a good place to start? It's like, okay, 66 books, help.
Yeah, it's a valid feeling. A really great question. If you're completely new to it, I often suggest starting with the Gospel of John.
Okay, why John?
It's just a beautiful, quite reflective look at Jesus's life and his teachings about love and belief. It's very relational.
Nice. What else?
For sheer emotional range and beautiful poetry, you can't beat the Psalms. They cover everything: joy, sorrow, anger, praise. They feel very human.
Psalms. Okay.
And if you want something really practical, short bursts of wisdom for everyday life, the book of Proverbs is fantastic. Easy to read, a little bit at a time.
John, Psalms, Proverbs, those sound like really good, accessible entry points. What about translations? Are there any digital tools that make it easier these days?
Oh, definitely. For modern English translations, the NIV, that's the New International Version, is very popular and readable. The ESV English Standard Version is also excellent, maybe a bit more literal.
NIV, ESV, got it.
And yes, technology helps. The YouVersion Bible app is completely free, and it's amazing. It has tons of translations, different reading plans to guide you, audio versions so you can listen. It makes it super accessible right on your phone or tablet.
That's great. So, wrapping this up, thinking about everything we've discussed,
Yeah.
what does this mean for you, the listener? Clearly, the Bible is much more than just some ancient document.
Much more.
For millions, it's a spiritual guide. It's a source of profound comfort. And for billions of believers, it's considered the living Word of God.
And it speaks differently to different people, doesn't it? Whether you approach it seeking knowledge or faith, or maybe just some inner peace.
Its power seems to lie in that enduring, multifaceted nature.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with a thought to ponder, perhaps. We've taken this deep dive into the Bible's origins, its incredible diversity, its undeniable global impact.
Yeah.
So the question for you is, thinking about history, about different cultures and traditions, can you think of any other single foundational text that has had such a comparable, wide-ranging, multifaceted influence on civilization across laws, arts, ethics, personal lives?
That's a big question to leave people with.
It is something to
That-
reflect on. And we really just encourage you to continue your own journey, keep exploring, keep seeking truth wherever you find it.